The cane clattered to the ground with a hollow sound that echoed across the crowded train station. Oliver Whitaker's arthritic fingers grasped at empty air, where his walking aid had been just moments before. Disoriented, and suddenly unmoored in his world of perpetual darkness. The 73-year-old man stumbled forward, his arms outstretched in a desperate attempt to regain his balance. "Sir, do not resist. Put your hands behind your back now." The officer's voice cut through the ambient noise of the station like a knife. Cold metal handcuffs clicked around Oliver's wrists before he could fully comprehend what was happening. "My cane, please. I need my cane," Oliver pleaded, his voice trembling. The familiar weight of the white-tipped walking aid had been his constant companion for 15 years, ever since macular degeneration had stolen the last of his sight. "I'm blind. I don't understand what's happening." The morning commuters at Westfield Central Station, usually hurrying past one another in anonymous urban ritual, stopped in their tracks. Phones emerged from pockets and purses, recording the scene as a second officer collected Oliver's belongings, a worn leather messenger bag, his folded identification cane, and the small paper cup that had been sitting beside him on the bench containing a few coins and a crumpled $5 bill. "That's him. That's the scammer." A woman's voice, sharp and accusatory, rose above the growing murmurs of the crowd. She stood several feet away, designer handbag clutched to her chest, manicured finger pointing directly at the elderly man. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail. Sunglasses perched on her head despite the station's fluorescent lighting. "I've seen him here for weeks. He's not really blind. It's all an act to get money from people." "Ma'am, we're handling the situation," the first officer responded, his hand still firmly gripping Oliver's arm. A younger man in a business suit stepped forward from the gathering crowd. "This is ridiculous. You can't just handcuff a blind man because someone made an accusation." "Sir, please step back. This is police business," the second officer said, placing himself between the crowd and his partner. As Oliver stood trembling in handcuffs, the crowd around them continued to grow, their collective outrage building like gathering storm clouds. 2 hours earlier, Oliver had been enjoying the familiar rhythm of his morning routine. His alarm clock's synthesized voice announced it was 6:30 a.m., and he swung his legs over the side of his bed with practiced precision. 61 steps from his bedroom to the kitchen. 14 steps to the bathroom. These measurements had been memorized years ago, when his daughter Amelia had first helped him map out his modest one-bedroom apartment. The coffee maker beeped as he ran his fingertips along the raised dots of his watch face. 7:15, he muttered to himself. Right on schedule. The rich aroma filled his small kitchen as he carefully poured the hot liquid into his thermos. Tuesday meant his weekly chess match with Eduardo, his friend of 20 years, at Westfield Central Station, before Eduardo caught his train to visit his grandchildren. Oliver's phone announced an incoming call. "Amelia calling," the robotic voice stated. "Good morning, sweetheart," Oliver answered, a smile warming his voice. "Hi, Dad. Just checking that we're still on for dinner tomorrow. The kids made you cards for your birthday." "Wouldn't miss it for the world. Tell Emma and Jack that Grandpa can't wait to see what they've made." He chuckled at his own joke, the self-deprecating humor about his blindness, a long-standing habit that put others at ease. "Dad, your jokes are terrible," Amelia laughed. "Are you heading to meet Eduardo today?" "Just about to leave. We're halfway through a game, and I think I might actually beat him this time." "You always say that." Her voice softened. "You've got your transit pass. Your phone's fully charged." "Yes to both. Mother hen, I've been making this trip every Tuesday for 5 years now. I think I've got it down." After hanging up, Oliver patted his pockets wallet, keys, phone, and collected his messenger bag and folding cane. The familiar routine gave him confidence. At his age, with his disability, routine was security. The journey to the station was one he could navigate with his eyes closed, which, he often joked to himself, was convenient given his circumstances. The bus driver, Hector, greeted him by name, and the newsstand vendor at the corner recognized his footsteps. Oliver had carefully constructed his world through sound, smell, touch, and memory. Though he lived alone since his wife Margaret passed 5 years ago, he was far from isolated. Westfield Central Station was particularly comforting in its acoustic predictability. The cavernous main hall created echoes that helped him navigate. The bench where he always waited for Eduardo was in a corner near Platform 3, away from the main rush, but close enough to the coffee cart that the aroma guided him there on days when his spatial memory failed him. Oliver arrived at his usual spot 40 minutes early. Eduardo's train had been delayed, according to the station announcements, so he settled in for a longer wait than usual. He took out his portable chess set with its raised squares and distinctive pieces, setting it beside him on the bench. A few regular commuters called out greetings as they passed, familiar with the sight of the elderly blind man and his chess set. A young woman approached, the click of her heels distinctive against the station's marble floor. "Excuse me, sir, is this seat taken?" Her voice was gentle, considerate. "Not at all. Please, join me." Oliver smiled, shifting his bag to make room. "I see you here every week with your chess set. Do you play with someone?" she asked after sitting down. "My old friend Eduardo. He takes the 9:15 train to visit his grandchildren. But we always make time for a game first. It's been our tradition for years." Oliver ran his fingers over the chess pieces, checking their positions from their last unfinished game. "That's wonderful. I've always wanted to learn chess properly." "It's never too late," Oliver replied with a warm smile. "I learned after I lost my sight, if you can believe it. Forces you to visualize the whole board in your mind." They chatted for a few more minutes before she had to catch her train. As she left, she pressed something into his hand. "For coffee," she said. "Have a beautiful day." Oliver's fingers identified a $5 bill. He placed it in the small paper cup he kept in his bag, for such occasions, not because he needed the money, but because he'd learned over the years that sometimes people felt good about helping, and rejecting their kindness served no one. The station grew busier as the morning rush picked up. Oliver checked the time again, 8:30. Still no Eduardo. He took out his phone to call, but before he could, another set of footsteps approached, heavier this time, purposeful. "Excuse me, what are you doing here?" The woman's voice was sharp, suspicious. "Waiting for a friend, ma'am," Oliver replied politely. "Right. With a cup for money out and everything, I see your little game. This is a respectable station, not a place for begging." Oliver frowned, confused by her hostility. "I'm not begging, ma'am. I'm just—" "Save it," she cut him off. "I've seen you here before with that cane and those dark glasses. Very convincing act. How much do you make a day pretending to be blind?" The accusation was so absurd that Oliver was momentarily speechless. In 15 years of blindness, he had encountered skepticism, awkwardness, and pity, but never this a direct accusation that he was faking his disability. "Ma'am, there's been a misunderstanding," he finally managed, keeping his voice level. "I'm not pretending anything. I'm legally blind from macular degeneration. I'm simply waiting for my friend for our weekly chess game. Chess game. Really? The sarcasm in her voice was unmistakable. That's the best story you could come up with. A blind man playing chess. It's adaptive chess. The pieces and squares are... I'm going to have to ask you to leave, she interrupted. I work in this building, and we've had problems with scammers before. I'm not leaving until my friend arrives, Oliver said firmly. I've done nothing wrong. He heard her huff in exasperation, then the click of her heels as she walked away. Oliver sat, heart racing from the confrontation, hands slightly trembling as he clutched his cane. Years of navigating the world as a blind person had taught him to choose his battles carefully, to maintain composure when faced with ignorance or prejudice. But the woman's accusation had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. 5 minutes later, he sensed people approaching multiple sets of footsteps, heavy and deliberate. Sir, a male voice said, authoritative and official. We've received a complaint about solicitation. I'm going to need to see some identification. No. Officer, please, the handcuffs aren't necessary. I'm a 73-year-old blind man. Oliver pleaded, the metal digging into his wrists. The loss of his cane had left him disoriented, vulnerable in a way he hadn't felt in years. Protocol, sir, the officer replied, his voice giving away nothing. We received a 911 call about a scam artist impersonating a disabled person to solicit money. The woman who had made the accusation stepped closer. Oliver could smell her perfume, something expensive and floral. I've seen him here for weeks, she insisted, always with that cup out. But have you noticed he reacts to visual cues? And that chess set, it's just a prop. It's people like him who make life harder for those with actual disabilities. Ma'am, I assure you, Oliver began. We found $47 in your cup and bag, sir. The second officer interrupted, his tone suggesting this was damning evidence. That's quite a haul for just sitting around. That's my money, for coffee and lunch with Eduardo. Check my ID. My medical card states I'm legally blind. Call my daughter. Panic was rising in Oliver's chest now, the public humiliation compounding his physical discomfort. The crowd around them had grown larger, their collective murmuring creating an acoustic cloud that made it harder for Oliver to orient himself. But distinct voices of protest began to rise above the general noise. This is outrageous, a deep male voice called out. I see him here every week with his friend playing chess, added a woman's voice. The first officer addressed the crowd. Please stand back and let us do our job. This is an official police matter. Your job is harassing elderly blind people now. Another voice joined the chorus of disapproval. I'm recording all of this. The accusing woman, whom several bystanders had started referring to as Karen within Oliver's hearing, seemed to grow more indignant with each passing second. He's fooled all of you. I work in loss prevention. I know how to spot these scams. A new voice entered the fray, authoritative, but not aggressive. What's going on here? The station's security badges made a distinctive jingle that Oliver immediately recognized. Frank Garcia, is that you? Oliver called out, hope rising in his voice. Mr. Whitaker. The security chief's voice registered surprise, then concern. Officers, why is this man in handcuffs? You know this individual, the first officer asked, his grip on Oliver's arm loosening slightly. Of course I know him. Oliver Whitaker comes through this station every Tuesday to meet his friend Eduardo Vasquez. They've been playing chess at that bench for years. Frank's keys jingled as he moved closer. Mr. Whitaker is a respected member of our regular commuter community. What happened? The Karen stepped forward, her voice slightly less confident now. This man was soliciting money with a cup. He's pretending to be blind. Frank's laugh was short and incredulous. Ma'am, I can personally vouch that Mr. Whitaker is legitimately blind. He lost his sight to macular degeneration years ago. He's a former English professor from Westfield Community College. How convenient that you know him, she responded, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. As if on cue, another voice called through the crowd. Oliver, what's happening? An elderly Latino man pushed through the gathered onlookers. Chess magazine clutched under his arm. Eduardo had finally arrived. Eduardo. Oliver called back, relief washing over him. There's been a misunderstanding. This woman called the police, claiming I'm faking being blind to get money from people. Eduardo's response was immediate and fierce. That is absurd. I've known this man for 20 years. We taught together before his retirement. Remove these handcuffs immediately. The first officer looked increasingly uncomfortable. Sir, we're responding to a 911 call. Then respond properly. Frank, the security chief, interrupted. I'm willing to make an official statement that Mr. Whitaker is a legitimate patron of this station with a documented disability. Will that suffice? The officers exchanged glances. The growing crowd, the multiple witnesses vouching for Oliver, and the security chief's intervention were clearly forcing a reassessment. The second officer nodded almost imperceptibly to his partner. We'll remove the handcuffs, but we still need to complete our report, the first officer said, reaching for his keys. As the cold metal released from his wrists, Oliver rubbed his skin where the handcuffs had left angry red marks. Eduardo was immediately at his side, placing the cane back in his hand and steadying him. My bag, my chess set, Oliver asked, still disoriented. Here, sir, the second officer said, a note of regret now evident in his voice. The Karen wasn't backing down entirely. I still think something's not right. If he's not begging, why does he have a cup out for money? A young woman stepped forward from the crowd. Oliver recognized her voice as the kind commuter who had given him $5 earlier. I gave him that money. It was a gift, not charity he solicited. He was nothing but kind and gracious to me. Frank turned to address the officers directly. I think we're done here. Gentlemen, unless you plan to arrest a blind senior citizen for sitting on a bench in a public train station with multiple witnesses confirming his legitimate reason for being here. The officers were clearly eager to extract themselves from the increasingly embarrassing situation. We'll need contact information from all parties for our report, the first officer said, professional mask firmly back in place. Karen was looking around nervously now, aware that the tide of public opinion had turned decidedly against her. I was just trying to protect the community. There are real scammers out there. And there are real consequences for making false reports. Eduardo responded sharply. As the immediate crisis de-escalated, Oliver became aware of just how many people had witnessed his humiliation. Dozens of commuters had stopped to observe the scene, many with phones raised. The trembling in his hands wouldn't subside. For a man who had carefully constructed a life of dignity and independence despite his disability, this public questioning of his integrity felt like a violation beyond description. By afternoon, the video had gone viral. Blind professor handcuffed after Karen calls 911, read the headline on the local news website. Oliver learned this when his phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from concerned friends, former colleagues, and eventually, reporters. Amelia arrived at his apartment in a state of barely contained fury. "Dad, why didn't you call me immediately? I had to find out about this from Sarah's Facebook feed." Oliver sat in his favorite armchair, a cup of tea gone cold beside him. The morning's events had left him exhausted in a way that transcended physical fatigue. "I didn't want to worry you, sweetheart." "Worry me, Dad. You were handcuffed by police in a public train station because some entitled woman couldn't mind her own business." Amelia's voice cracked. "Do you have any idea how many people have seen this? The video has over 100,000 views already." Oliver winced. The thought of his humiliation being broadcast to the world added another layer to his distress. "I never wanted to be internet famous, especially not like this." Amelia sat beside him, taking his hand. Her touch was so like her mother's, gentle but strong. "The comments are overwhelmingly supportive of you, Dad. People are outraged on your behalf." "That's something, I suppose." Oliver attempted a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Eduardo was magnificent, and Frank from station security. Without them, I might have ended up at the police station. The woman who called 911, they're calling her train station Karen, online has been identified. She's some middle manager at one of those big retail chains. Their social media accounts are being flooded with people demanding they take action. Amelia's voice held a note of grim satisfaction. "I don't want anyone to lose their livelihood over this, Amelia. She was wrong, terribly wrong, but nothing. Dad, actions have consequences. What she did wasn't just rude or insensitive, it was dangerous. What if those officers had been more aggressive? What if no one had stepped in?" The fear behind her anger was palpable. Oliver couldn't argue with that logic, though his natural inclination was toward forgiveness. Even he had to acknowledge the potential danger of the situation. "What happens now?" he asked instead. "That's partly why I'm here. There's a lawyer who wants to speak with you, pro bono. She specializes in disability rights cases." "A lawyer, Amelia. I don't want to sue anyone." "Dad, this isn't just about you anymore. The video has sparked a larger conversation about how disabled people are treated, about false reporting, about police response. You have a chance to make sure this doesn't happen to someone else." Oliver sat in silence, processing her words. Throughout his years of adjusting to blindness, he had strived to maintain his independence without becoming an activist. He taught his students about justice and civic responsibility for decades, but had always preferred to lead by quiet example rather than vocal advocacy. The phone rang again, interrupting his thoughts. Amelia answered it on speaker. "Mr. Whitaker, this is Councilwoman Diaz. I'm calling to express my deepest regrets about what happened to you this morning." Oliver straightened in his chair. Elena Diaz was their district's representative on the city council, a former student of his from nearly 20 years ago. "Councilwoman, this is unexpected." "Professor Whitaker, you might not remember me, but I took your American literature seminar in 2003. You changed how I thought about civic responsibility through literature." A genuine smile finally broke through Oliver's weariness. "Elena Diaz, of course I remember. Your final paper on Thoreau's civil disobedience was exceptional." "You remember that?" She sounded touched. "Well, I've organized an emergency town hall meeting for tomorrow evening. The incident at the station has raised serious concerns about police response protocols and the rights of our disabled citizens. Would you be willing to attend and speak?" Oliver hesitated. Public speaking had been his profession for 4 decades. But this was different, more personal, more political. Amelia squeezed his hand encouragingly. "I'll be there," he found himself saying. After the call ended, Oliver turned his face toward the window. Though he couldn't see the afternoon light filtering through the blinds, he could feel its warmth on his skin. "Your mother would tell me to speak up," he said quietly. "She absolutely would," Amelia agreed. "She'd be furious about what happened, but proud of how you're responding." That evening, as Oliver prepared for bed, his phone rang once more. The caller ID announced an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Whitaker, this is Detective Paul Ramirez with the Westfield Police Department. I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all, Detective. How can I help you?" Oliver sat on the edge of his bed, suddenly alert despite his exhaustion. "I'm calling about the incident at the train station this morning. First, I want to extend a personal apology on behalf of the department. The responding officer should have handled the situation differently." "I appreciate that, Detective. There's something else you should know. We've been investigating a series of incidents involving the woman who called 911 on you today." The detective paused. "This isn't the first time Ms. Shepard has reported someone for allegedly fraudulent behavior." Oliver's grip tightened on the phone. "What do you mean?" "In the past 6 months, she's made 8 different 911 calls reporting suspicious individuals at various locations around the city. All of these individuals were either people of color, disabled, or both. None of her reports resulted in legitimate arrests." The information settled heavily on Oliver's shoulders. What had happened to him wasn't an isolated incident or misunderstanding. It was part of a pattern. "Why are you telling me this, Detective?" "Because we're building a case for criminal misuse of emergency services and potentially bias-motivated harassment. Your incident is the first one that was extensively documented by multiple witnesses. We'd like your cooperation." The revelation transformed something for Oliver. What he had been willing to dismiss as an unfortunate misunderstanding now appeared as something more sinister, a deliberate pattern of targeting vulnerable people. "You'll have my full cooperation, Detective." After hanging up, Oliver lay awake in the darkness that had been his constant companion for 15 years. Tomorrow's town hall meeting had taken on a new significance. This wasn't just about his experience anymore. It was about a systemic problem that affected many others who might not have had the support network he was fortunate to have. Chihuahua. The community center was packed well beyond capacity. Oliver could sense it in the acoustics of the room, the way sounds bounce differently when absorbed by bodies rather than empty chairs. The murmur of the crowd created a tapestry of sound that helped him visualize the space better than any sight ever could. Amelia guided him to the front row of seats. "It's standing room only," she whispered. "There must be 300 people here. News vans outside, too." Councilwoman Diaz opened the meeting with a formal statement about community standards and the rights of all citizens. The police chief followed, announcing an internal review of response protocols for calls involving disabled individuals. Then it was Oliver's turn to speak. Amelia led him to the podium, placing his hand on its edge so he could orient himself. The room fell silent as he cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his professor's voice filling the room without need for amplification. "Yesterday morning, I was simply waiting for my friend of 20 years for our weekly chess game. By noon, I had become an unwitting symbol in a conversation about disability rights, police procedure, and the consequences of prejudice. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I lost my sight 15 years ago, but I never lost my vision for the kind of community we could be. A community where differences are respected, where assumptions are challenged, where we ask questions before we call authorities. Yesterday, I was handcuffed because someone looked at me and saw not a person, but a stereotype, not an individual with dignity and purpose, but a potential criminal. The room remained utterly silent, hanging on his words. I've since learned that the woman who called 911 has a history of similar reports against marginalized individuals. This reveals something important. What happened to me wasn't just about blindness. It was about power, and who gets to belong in public spaces without question. Oliver gripped the edges of the podium, leaning forward slightly. But I also witnessed something remarkable yesterday. Strangers stepping forward to defend me. A community of commuters becoming advocates in an instant. My former student, now your councilwoman, organizing this meeting within 24 hours. This too reveals something important about who we are. He smiled then, genuine and warm. I taught literature for 40 years. The stories we tell shape how we understand ourselves and others. So I ask you tonight, what story will Westfield tell about itself? Will we be the community that allows fear and suspicion to govern our interactions? Or will we be the community that stands up for dignity and justice? Even when, especially when it would be easier to walk past and mind our own business. The applause began before he finished his final sentence, swelling to fill the room. But it wasn't the approval that moved Oliver. It was the sense that his words had landed on fertile ground. As he returned to his seat, guided by Amelia, a new voice rose from the back of the room. I'd like to speak. The crowd hushed as footsteps approached the front. Oliver couldn't see who it was, but the sudden tension in Amelia's grip on his arm told him something significant was happening. That's her, Amelia whispered. The woman who called 911 on you. Oliver's breath caught. He hadn't expected Vivian Shepherd to show her face at this meeting. The microphone crackled as she adjusted it. My name is Vivian Shepherd, she began, her voice tight but controlled. I'm the person who called the police on Mr. Whitaker yesterday. A murmur rippled through the crowd, not entirely friendly. I'm not here to defend my actions. I'm here because... She paused, seeming to struggle with her words. Because I need to publicly acknowledge the harm I caused. The room fell silent again, surprise replacing hostility. I told myself I was protecting the community. I told myself I was exposing fraud. But the truth is, I never once considered the possibility that I might be wrong. I never considered the real person I was affecting with my accusations. Her voice wavered slightly before steadying again. The detective who contacted me last night made it clear that my pattern of behavior has been harmful and potentially criminal. I've been suspended from my job. My family is receiving threats. But none of that compares to the humiliation and danger I put Mr. Whitaker in yesterday. Oliver listened intently, trying to gauge the sincerity behind her words. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want this community to know that I will be facing the consequences of my actions. I've agreed to participate in a restorative justice program. I'll be working with disability rights organizations to educate myself and others. And I will never again make assumptions about someone based on a passing glance. She cleared her throat. Mr. Whitaker, I owe you a direct apology. What I did was inexcusable, and I am deeply, deeply sorry." The silence that followed was electric. Everyone seemed to be waiting for Oliver's response. Amelia squeezed his arm questioningly. Did he want to address her? Oliver rose slowly to his feet, Amelia helping him navigate the few steps to the microphone. "Ms. Shepherd," he said, his voice even, "I believe that people can change when they confront their mistakes honestly. Your presence here tonight suggests courage that was absent yesterday. I accept your apology, not just for myself, but for all the others you've targeted in the past." He paused, then added, "True justice isn't about punishment. It's about transformation. I hope this experience transforms you, as yesterday transformed me." The tension in the room shifted, not disappearing entirely, but evolving into something more complex, a communal witnessing of what might be the beginning of healing. Councilwoman Diaz took control of the meeting again, outlining concrete policy changes being proposed for police response protocols. Representatives from disability rights organizations presented statistics on the harassment and discrimination faced by disabled individuals in public spaces. The Transit Authority announced new training programs for all staff. As the formal meeting concluded, Oliver found himself surrounded by well-wishers and supporters. Eduardo clasped his hand firmly. "You spoke like the professor you've always been. My friend. Teaching until the very end." Frank from station security approached next. "Mr. Whitaker, the Transit Authority wants to make you an official advisor for our accessibility programs. Paid position. Would you consider it?" Before Oliver could respond, a reporter's question cut through the crowd. "Mr. Whitaker, how does it feel to have become an overnight symbol for disability rights?" Oliver smiled wryly. "At 73, there's nothing overnight about me, young man. I've been living with blindness for 15 years, teaching for 40, and believing in the fundamental decency of people for all of my life. If yesterday's incident helps others see what I've always known, that communities are stronger when they protect their most vulnerable members, then I'm grateful for that silver lining." 3 months later, Oliver sat at his usual bench at Westfield Central Station, his fingers moving confidently over the chess pieces. Eduardo had just made a particularly clever move, putting Oliver's king in check. "You're not letting me win today." "I see," Oliver chuckled. "Never," Eduardo replied seriously. "It would be disrespectful to your intellect. My friend." The station had changed subtly since the incident. New tactile paving had been installed to assist visually impaired travelers. Station announcements were clearer and more frequent. Staff had received comprehensive training on assisting disabled passengers. Less tangible, but equally significant, was the change in atmosphere. Regular commuters greeted Oliver by name now. Parents used his story to teach their children about respect and inclusion. The incident, as it was now commonly referred to, had become a catalyst for community education. The legal consequences had been substantial. Vivian Shepherd had pleaded guilty to misuse of emergency services and completed her restorative justice program. She was now, ironically, volunteering at a vision loss support group under supervision, her first tentative steps toward making amends. The 2 officers involved had been required to undergo additional training and community service. The police department had revised its protocols for responding to calls involving disabled individuals. Most significantly for Oliver personally, the city had established the Whitaker Initiative for Public Accessibility, with Oliver as its honorary chair. The program provided grants to local businesses to improve accessibility and funded educational programs about disability awareness. "Check," Eduardo announced, breaking into Oliver's thoughts. Oliver smiled, refocusing on the game. His fingers traced the board, analyzing positions and possibilities. Footsteps approached light, hesitant. Oliver recognized them immediately, having developed an acute ear for the distinctive gaits of regular station users. "Good morning, Lily," he called out before she spoke. "Mr. Whitaker, how do you always know it's me?" The 8-year-old's voice was filled with wonder. "You skip every third step," he explained with a smile. "Nobody else does that." Lily was the daughter of one of the station's ticket agents. Since the incident, she had developed a fascination with Oliver and Eduardo's chess games. More importantly, she had started learning Braille alongside her regular studies, inspired by Oliver's demonstrations of how he read. "I brought you something," she said proudly, placing an object in his hands. Oliver's fingers explored the gift, a handmade card with Braille dots punched carefully through the paper. Slowly, he deciphered the message, "My hero." His throat tightened with emotion. "This is beautiful. Lily, your Braille is getting very good." "Dad says I should be a teacher for blind kids when I grow up," she announced. "But I told him I want to be a lawyer, like Ms. Reynolds." Melissa Reynolds was the disability rights attorney who had represented Oliver in the aftermath of the incident. She had become something of a local celebrity for her passionate advocacy. "The world needs both teachers and lawyers, Lily," Oliver said gently, "especially ones who understand the importance of accessibility." After Lily skipped away to join her father, Eduardo made a contemplative sound. "You know, my friend, for all the unpleasantness of what happened, look at the ripples it has created. That child will grow up with a completely different understanding of disability than our generation had." Oliver nodded, his hands returning to the chess pieces. "When I lost my sight, I thought I had lost my ability to influence the world. I was wrong. Sometimes our greatest impact comes not from what we choose to do, but from how we respond to what is done to us." The station announcer called the arrival of the 9:15 train Eduardo's train, right on schedule. Some things, thankfully, remained predictable. "Same time next week?" Eduardo asked as he packed up his chess magazine. "I wouldn't miss it," Oliver replied, carefully folding his cane and placing it in his bag. As Eduardo departed, Oliver remained on the bench for a few moments longer, absorbing the sounds of the station around him, the click of heels on marble, the hum of conversation, the distant rumble of trains. These everyday noises that had once been merely the backdrop to his life now carried deeper significance. They were the sounds of a community that had seen injustice and chosen to respond with solidarity rather than indifference. Oliver Whitaker stood, unfolded his cane, and made his way toward the station exit with the confident steps of a man who knew exactly where he belonged in the world.